And now for the trickiest part of the whole process, but don't worry, we've got some tips and tricks and some little guidelines that are going to help us get through this process here. So we've got our cover material, we've got our case template, and together these two things are going to become our case that we will wrap our text block in. And so you'll see here, we've got these two markings here that line right up with our spines, same on the bottom there. And then you'll notice also that these markings here line up with our cover boards. And so that's just kind of going to help us keep track of where we are once we flip this thing over and we're on the others, working with the other side. And what you'll also kind of see is that, there's the boards themselves have some thickness, right? And so we got to work that cover material into those channels. And so what I'm going to show you is going to highlight exactly how we get that done. And so we're going to work from the back side of it. And we're going to lay this down with the spine stiffener, in contact with that cover board, okay? But where is it? So that's what we kind of have to align here with those markings on the other side. And you can see through the paper, and you can also feel through the paper to kind of find where that is. Make sure that it's looking like it's lining up on the back side as well. Take some minor adjustments here. And this is really important to get right. So if you need to kind of unbend everything and just kind of start over, you can definitely do a reset there. And I think we're looking good on these sides as well as far as lining up with the board. And I'm just kind of giving this a little crease here to help remind me, where that all sits. And so then it won't move out of place while it's kind of sitting there in that little pocket that we've made for it here. Now, if we were to just glue this down here, we actually wouldn't, it would be too flat on the other side. And what I mean by that is it wouldn't be worked down into, you're going to work that down into these little grooves there. And so you'll see this is a several step process to get that cover material worked into those grooves. All right, our creases did a good job of keeping this thing in place while I did that little flip. Everything still looks about where it's supposed to be. So the first thing we're going to want to do is just glue the spine stiffener exactly in the middle. So we're going to lift this up, get our glue, our big paintbrush, and we're going to work that glue all the way up to that fold that we're going back to there. And then all the way out to that crease. Just everywhere that crease is, glue out to there. The good thing about this cover material, sometimes you'll use paper as a cover material. This is not gonna start to warp on you and absorb that liquid. So this is going to lay a little flat for you as you're working with it. That's kind of nice. And again, the creases are showing me where my cover board is going to lay. And then once I lay it down, you'll see I'm not just going to let it sit where it lays naturally here. I'm going to press that spine down in there. Maybe use the rounded part. I lay down just a little bit of scratch paper so the glue doesn't stick to my surface. I'm going to peel this back. I want to get it into there, okay? So actually came all the way off, so I'm going to just make sure the spine is where I want it to be and glued how I like it. Okay. Oh, nope. Not how I like it. See, you can reposition even after this part, so don't worry. This doesn't make for good viewing. Demonstrating and doing are two different things sometimes. So we're going to go all the way back to the checking. It's important to be aligned with this center part. That's really what we're getting at here. Center is aligned. There we go. Let's give it a little bit more glue. So with the spine placed in the center, this whole piece of the cloth is going to move slightly this way as we work into that groove there. And you'll see that start to take shape as I work it here. Pressing up firmly against that cover board. Now the rest of the cover can lay on that board when a little bit of that slack got taken up in, maybe a millimeter or two, gets pulled this way. And, the design is made so that it's accounting for that. And it's really important to get this worked in very, very sturdily, because you don't want, bubbles and creases to happen here in your channel. And then you also want, these nice, what they call shoulders, which are these, kind of the bump there from that shoulder, or that divot. All right. That's looking really nice. Now you can press too hard with your bone folder, and you can damage it with your sharp point, so be careful with that. If you have any concern about that and you really want to dig in there, you can actually put a piece of paper over it as you do that working, and then put your whole back into it. Go over it a few times, really work into that crease. Let that glue really bond there. All right, so now we just have to do the same thing with the other side. So we'll pull up, paint to there. Again, using those creases to mark where we want to paint until. All the way tucked underneath there. There we go. Again, this is the hardest part. And it's the part that, it's worth taking a little bit of time to watch this video all the way through and make sure you're ready to go all the way through without stopping, and make sure everything is aligned. Work, with confidence. Because this is essentially what is going to form the outside of your book, and you want that to look nice. Then once we've got this in a really good spot, then it's just a simple matter of wrapping this around your text block. That's the easy part. A little glue there. No one's going to see that. All right. We peel it back a little bit so that it has kind of that slack that I can pull into that channel. I hope the camera can see that. Working that into that channel, taking up, it just pulls that cover a little bit over a little bit. It's hard to describe. And then once you've kind of taken that slack up, then you can lay the rest of it down, and then just make sure this is worked in there. And really making contact with that template that's on the other side. Yeah, you can really kind of see how, if it were just laying flat across here, the book wouldn't open and close properly. And so this is gonna allow the book to function as a book, as well as to make sure that it just looks really handsome and book-like. Yeah. I'm going to place this over the cover board itself and just give it a good, making sure that glue is just making contact everywhere, spreading out a little bit. That's looking really, really nice. So then all we have to do next is to tuck these corners up under the rest of the case. And so that'll happen from this angle. I'm going to swap out a little bit of my scratch paper. Got a little messy. All right. So one thing we will need to do is trim these corners. That's some excess material that's going to get in our way if we don't get rid of it. And what I kind of like to do is use about a bone folder's width in a 45-degree angle. And I'll caution you here, much better to have too much than too little. So you don't want to cut straight to the corner there. You want to have, 1/4 inch about left over. That's way too much. But, like I said, better too much than too little. That's more like it. Also probably too much there. But again, I wanted to kind of show that even too much is still going to work out for us here. Now we're going to work top, bottom, and then side to side. You'll kind of see what I mean there as far as flipping these over. It might not even be the top. That might be the bottom. That's the top. Trust me. All right. So just painting. I'm using my glue. Making sure I have a generous amount, but not a sloppy amount. And really how I just know that is if I'm seeing the cover part underneath, I just want to make sure that it's got no dry parts. I'm going to do a little bit underneath each corner here. They're starting to pop up. All right. And then this is a trick my sister actually taught me that changed my life. So folding the book up this way kind of gets the whole process started. Then starting from the middle here, coming down, and then pinching these middle parts. There we go. Making those look nice. Don't want them to bubble on me. So I'm just making sure this middle part gets done properly first. And I've got a little bit of horns here, so I'm trying to turn those into something a little smoother. Okay, now then once that middle part is done, then working from the middle to the outside, kind of pulling them with the fingers here. Pulling and dragging that cover material onto this cover board here. There we go. And I'm getting a little bit of bubbling. Again, that's not the end of the world. That's going to get covered up by your end paper. All right, we're going to do the same thing on this other side here. Pulling and dragging. Glue. Got a little dry while I was talking there. Just let me work it slowly. And it's not wanting to lay down, so I'm actually going to sneak a little bit of glue underneath here. And it's going to make my fingers a little messy when I pull them through that. It's going to be fine. We're working inside to outside to kind of remove these little bubbles that are wanting to crop up here. And again, this isn't the end of the world if you have a few bubbles like I do. Because our end paper is going to lay over that. All right, let's see what we got here. So a nice, handsome top. Let's do the same thing on the bottom. All right, same idea. Tip it so that the case kind of creases itself there, gets the whole thing started. Makes it so much easier. All right, start with the center. Make sure that is laying how you like it. Pinching in that little crease there if you need to. don't worry, the sides go much easier than this part. And the reason being is that there's a little bit of irregularity in the width of where the spine stiffener is and the cover boards themselves. Some tutorials that I've seen will use the same size spine stiffener as the cover boards itself. I think that you'll still have a problem in the gutters are still there, and so they're going to be, you may even have more of a problem. All right, that's looking good there. And that's laying down a little bit nicer than the bottom. Still a couple wrinkles. Again, this isn't going to be seen. Maybe just a little bit up here. So we'll smooth that. All right. Beautiful. I'm going to work with a new spot on my scratch paper here. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint here, and then we're going to take just a moment to do what they call turning in these corners. And so that just means pinching it so that there's not going to be this excess little flap of material. Kind of like wrapping a Christmas present. So we're painting. We're getting some glue into those corners. The sides and top meet. All right, this is actually my favorite part of the whole process, and don't ask me why. It's this turning in of these little corners. And so I may even zoom a bit here. So let's do a quick zoom. All right, there we go. So this pokes in and then lays flat against the top there. See that? Beautiful. And then we'll do the same thing at the top here, and then I'll zoom back out. I'm going to poke it in. There we go. Just so that the angle of that guy is going to tuck underneath the top there. So now I'm going to zoom back out. And then with this one, we don't need to tip the whole thing. We can actually use the bone folder to kind of do the tipping for us, and pushing against that side, and then laying that down. So much flatter, so much easier than trying to get around that center part. And the tipping in is what kind of creates these little folds on these corners. Just gonna make sure those stay down. And that's going to be a nice clean corner to the book there. And you will see those corners, so you want those to be laying down nicely. The corners are kind of just, there's about an 1/8 of an inch of the cover that sticks up above the text block, and that helps protect the text block. I feel like Bob Ross over here, just painting, talking. And if you don't know who Bob Ross is, you should Google him next. I have a hard time believing anyone wasn't, but kids these days. All right. Do my favorite part, tipping in, folding. A little bit of that glue is gonna going to start to squeeze around, get on your bone folder, maybe even get on your cover material. It dries clear, so it really isn't going to be too terrible of a problem if it's even on the front of your cover. But just best practice to try and keep it managed, keep it off your workstation. But it will dry clear, and you can kind of clean it up a little bit after. It's always nice to get your hands a little dirty. There we go. That's looking really nice. Yep, see? I got a spot there on this cover material. This is actually a pretty waterproof material here, so that'll actually just rub right off. I'm gonna get a sponge and clean that off. Here it comes. There you go, see? Best to not get it on there in the first place, but it comes right off. All right, so there you have it. You have a case that will wrap around your text block. And I'm just gonna give it a little press here. Let's let it dry. And you can place it under a heavy book to let it dry. If you are impatient, I have gone ahead and cased right away. So if you want to move on to the next step, you can. And then when you press the book and the case together, they'll both kind of get a pressing at the same time. So this is going to wrap around that in the next step. See you then.